Hey guys, welcome back to 3.1b. These are notes for properties of matter. I'll start with the joke of the day. What do you call an educated tube? A graduated cylinder. All right. So let's go and get going today. The paper that you're going to need is this one. It says 3.1b. You'll get it from the front of the room, properties of matter notes. Please make sure to slow down and pause as you need. All right. Samples of matter, and this is review, so you don't have to write anything right now. We can draw some things in just a little bit. A substance is a single sample of matter that is pure with no other things present. It can be an element on our periodic table of elements, or it can be a compound, which is a mixture of two or more elements. And some simple examples of a substance that's the same all the way through would be salt, which is sodium and chloride, and sugar, which is carbon, hydrogen, and I believe there's even some oxygen in there. A mixture, and you're more than welcome to draw over on the right-hand side of your paper. A mixture is going to be a combination of substances that are not chemically combined. You can see the different parts, the raisins, the cashews, the peanuts, all the different parts, and that makes it a mixture. In a mixture, each substance keeps its own characteristics. They don't combine. Now, you can definitely draw on this page where you see the box for substance. The substance, for example, here's water. We only see water all the way through, but really you've got two hydrogens and an oxygen, as opposed to your mixture of trail mix, where you have the cashew nuts and raisins and the different parts. All right. A property is a characteristic of matter. Each pure substance has a unique set of properties that can be used to identify it. Scientists are always trying to figure out what something is or what's going to happen when you mix two items together, two elements. The properties of a substance depend on its structure at the molecular and atomic levels. And so these are things that we can't see, but some of the properties can be its mass, it can be its density, it can be its color, it can be whether it's flammable or not. So here we're going to start looking at the physical properties of matter. And the physical properties today, you see some gold here, and gold is Au 79 on the periodic table of elements, which means it's got 79 electrons. You can see water above. Water is a mixture, and water is a substance that has hydrogen and oxygen together. You can see that it's boiling as well. And here we go. A physical property is a property of matter that can be observed or measured without changing the identity of matter, which means you don't destroy it, you don't change it. You can just look at it and you can determine what its properties are. You can look at it and see its color. You can look at it and find its odor. You can touch it for its texture. You can determine what the state of matter is when it's sitting in a room. That's what's called room temperature. You can even check density and even boiling and melting points. And these are just some of the examples of physical properties. There are many, many more. You can, for example, determine if something is magnetic by sticking it to a magnet. And if it is, then it has the physical property of magnetism. So the first one we're going to talk about today is solubility. We're going to use this during our powder at the crime scene lab quite a bit. And the ability to dissolve in another substance makes something soluble. This is sand. You can see when the sand is placed in the water, and over to the right, the sand has not dissolved, so we call it insoluble. Another example of this would be putting pepper in water. It definitely is insoluble. An example of soluble would be salt. When you put salt into water in certain portions, you can mix it around and the salt will dissolve, which means you can't see it anymore, but we know it's there. Sugar is also another example of soluble. Melting point is the temperature at which the substance moves from a solid to a liquid. And every one of these, hey guys, every one of these has their own melting point and their own boiling point. And no two elements are the same. Go ahead and pause and write those down. And lastly, density. Density is the measure of how compact the object's particles are. It's not the same as mass or weight. Every substance has its own density. So everything that's on the periodic table of elements has its own level of density that's different than everything else. For example, gold has a lot of density, which is why it's difficult to put your finger through it or break it in half. But water's pretty easy to put your hands through and separate. You can see, for example, that I have some Play-Doh here. The density of this Play-Doh, which is a mixture of elements, is not very high. It's very low. But the density of this water bottle is incredibly high because the level is high, because it's difficult for me to get the pieces to separate and to break apart. And that makes something dense. That's all for notes today. We'll look at chemical properties the next time around. Be careful in lab, and who's responsible for spilling the powder, and what's the powder at the crime scene?